A year and a half ago, I was waking up every single morning in my disgusting junior year college dorm room. I had a single at the time, so I was kind of lucky. And I was living with four of my other friends at the same time who were kind of down the hall in our one dorm. And I was waking up every morning at 9:30, 10, walking over to our disgusting dining hall. And pretty much like the only breakfast that I would ever eat there would just be like these like disgusting like French toast sticks full of calories, absolutely disgusting. And I would have these like greasy sausages, and that was my breakfast. For 3 years, my freshman, sophomore, and most of my junior year, that's what my life consisted of. Greasy sausages, French toast sticks, waking up every single morning, and just like being a shell of a man. Every single weekend, my friends and I, we would go out to the bars. We would go out to these like clubs in, Worcester, Massachusetts. That's where I went to school. And I just remember like every time that I would ever go out, like the only thing that I wanted to do was talk to women, right? That was like my whole goal. I just wanted to meet a girl. I wanted to meet like a super nice girl that, I felt like I could, just like bond with and, start a relationship with. And I just remember like every time that I would ever like try and go up to talk to a girl, mind you, I was 218 pounds, right? I just wasn't attractive. My face was like so round. It was just like, it looked like I'd swallowed a bowling ball. It was terrible. And every time that I would like go up and talk to a girl, I just remember like the look on her face. And I remember how she wanted nothing to do with me. And, that really killed me inside. Right? I couldn't pick up a girl in person unless I was hammered. The only time that I would ever talk to a girl was when I was blacked out drunk at a bar or at a club, and I could never talk to a girl completely sober. It was like one of the worst experiences that I've ever had. And, a couple months after that, I ended up just like matching with this girl on Tinder, and I ended up, getting her Snapchat from it. I don't know, at the time, like I was like, okay, like let me get your Snapchat. Like that's the kind of like, teenage mentality that I had. And I got her Snapchat, and then we started dating. We dated for about like eight or so months. And, throughout that relationship, it was just like she was constantly toxic, right? I was super toxic as well. It was a really bad dynamic, It was just like one of those things where it's just like it was doomed to fail from the start. Always arguments, always just, constant, just debates all the time. It was just like a never-ending argument and a never-ending fight, and it's never something that I ever want to go back to. And it's crazy because nowadays I'm sitting in my car filming this video for my Instagram account, which I have like 11.5 thousand followers on Instagram. Like, I started this account 8 months ago. Genuinely, I started this account 8 months ago, and it's actually one of the craziest feelings that there's like 11,000 people that even care to watch me. And it's something that I could have never imagined when I started this like 8 months ago. And at the time when I was in college, right, waking up in my shitty college dorm room, eating French toast sticks and sausages for breakfast, wondering why I just was depressed all the time. I wondered why I was so anxious all the time. I was having fun, right? I was playing college baseball at the time, and I was a catcher, and that was like my whole life. I loved it, with every part of my body. And, every weekend I'd go out with my friends, and we'd smoke weed, and, we'd drink alcohol. I'd get absolutely blasted, hammered every single weekend. And I constantly just wondered, like, why am I not happy? I'm doing all these things that are supposed to give me dopamine. I'm doing all these things that I thought would make me happy, but at the end of the day, I would get home hammered, and I wasn't happy. And, if I could have looked forward to, where I am right now and kind of the situation that I live in right now, I would have quickly realized it's, the reason why you feel so depressed and you feel anxious and you feel like you're kind of just not doing enough, it's because you're meant for more. I had no idea that I was meant for being an online fitness coach. I had no idea that I was meant to be making at least 10K a month right through social media. I had no idea that this was possible, right? And I constantly wondered why I was so anxious and so depressed constantly. But now I look back, and of course I was anxious. Of course I felt like a shell of a man, because I was a shell of a man. I was not living up to the standard that I was supposed to be, right? I believe like we are all put on this earth with like this capability of doing something incredible, right? We all have something, you know, given to us by birth from God that he's like, okay, this is your plan. This is the path for you. This is the path that I'm going to take you on. And I never really realized it, but it's like, okay, you know, I get a girlfriend like freshman year of high school. We end up breaking up. And that leads me to the next girl that I dated junior year of high school. We end up breaking up after a couple months. And that led me to the next girl I dated. That led me to the next girl I dated, which ended up pushing me down this path of self-development. We are exactly where we're supposed to be. And I didn't realize this for so long. I didn't realize the fact that like, okay, the reason why all these weird and terrible things keep happening is because it's all directing me to this one place that I'm supposed to be at. All these different relationships ending, all these like mental spirals that I've had in my life, me quitting baseball, all led me down to this fitness journey. And then that fitness journey led me down this path of being an online fitness coach and being able to help people. That's it. And if it was never for, you know, my junior year, right, when I started this fitness journey back in February of 2025, I hired a fitness coach for myself, right? You know, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around, right? At the time, I was hanging out with dudes who, they would get hammered every weekend, they would get blackout drunk, and they would smoke weed, and that was the entirety of my life at the time. That's all that I did at that point. That was like what brought me joy, brought me dopamine, hanging out with random girls that I barely even knew, right? That's what made me happy at the time. Scrolling on Snapchat, Quick Ad, and Tinder, and, you know, talking to as many girls as possible. That was my life. And, you know, when I met this fitness coach, right, I was in a really dark place. I had just gotten broken up with a couple months before that. I found out that, you know, I was a junior in college, and I found out I wasn't going to be a starter on my college baseball team. So the 2 things that I really cared about the most in my life, baseball and that girl that I dated, both gone, right? So I was like, okay, I have nothing right now. That was literally me. I had nothing. And I thought that I had nothing. And, you know, I was constantly surrounding myself with these guys who were drinking and smoking. So that was like the norm, right? I was hanging around these dudes, and that was what was normal in my life. So I hired this fitness coach because I wanted to be around more. This fitness coach, right? Incredible physique, incredible mindset. And I surrounded myself with him, his energy, his thoughts, his ideas. And slowly but surely, I became just like him. You are the average of the 5 people you hang around. And I barely hung out around my friends. The only person that I was really interacting with at the time was my family and my fitness coach, Evan, right? That was his name. And that is the biggest turning point of my entire life, because I was constantly surrounding myself with a guy who had such an elite mentality behind fitness, business. He was motivated. He inspired me, and he pushed me down this path. He got me shredded because I started my fitness journey with a fitness coach, right? That's how I got into this in the first place. I didn't magically just get shredded on my own. No, I was first a client of a fitness coach before I became a fitness coach. Right? So I know what it's like to be a fitness coach client. And this guy genuinely changed my life, right? This guy pushed me down this path of self-development because I allowed myself to get help from him, right? He killed every limiting belief that I had. He told me this was possible. I didn't believe getting a 6-pack was possible because I had never had a 6-pack ever in my life. And he taught me habits. He taught me mindset, and he built me into the man that I am today, making 5 figures a month, helping people transform their lives, their bodies, their mindsets, and their physiques. If it was never for this guy brainwashing me into becoming the man that I am today, I would have never gone down this path. And now I do the same for other people. I help people brainwash themselves. I help people transform their identities. You've got to believe that this is possible. And when you don't have it, when I was 220 pounds, I didn't think that this was possible. I didn't think it was possible to have an elite physique. I didn't think it was possible to have, you know, one of those like physiques where, you know, you start going on TikTok and Instagram and social media and you start scrolling, right? I didn't think that physique was possible. I thought it was steroids or something along those lines. And it's like, okay, now I have it, right? It's because I surrounded myself with a guy who had it. That's how you kill every limiting belief, right? You believe that it's not possible until you constantly surround yourself with the guy who has it, with the type of energy of the person who has it, right? Because once you start surrounding yourself with these guys and with these people who have it, you slowly suck up their energy and it just goes into your mind and you slowly become that person, right? You develop into this new version of you because you're constantly surrounded by these thoughts, ideas, these like energies that these people like emit, and you slowly suck all of it up and you become just like them. The fact that you think it's not possible is because you have never been around it before. You're constantly just around people who don't have it. You know, you think that it's impossible to get a six-pack. You think that it's impossible to look a certain way. And it's entirely because you're constantly around people who don't have that great of a physique. So you never think that it's possible, right? It's like, you know, the way that I view money now is so different, right? I used to be around people who, you know, there's nothing wrong with this, but I used to be around people who just made minimum wage, $15 an hour. And I used to think that that was normal, right? Until I surrounded myself with guys making $10,000 in a day. And then I started to realize what's truly possible, right? When you allow yourself to be in rooms of people better than you, people who have everything that you want, that's when you start to really take in their energy and you become just like them. You start to think like them, you move like them, and eventually you become just like them. But it starts with surrounding yourself with those people, right? I would never be in the position that I'm in right now if I never hired a fitness coach myself. I would never be making the money that I make now. I would never be making the impact that I have now. And I definitely wouldn't have the physique that I now be through the habits and the identity shift of the person who's 10% body fat that I've gained. Truthfully, if you want to have an exceptional physique and you truly want to be elite, you have to get to a point where you're just like willing to put your ego to the side, right? For so long, I didn't want help. I didn't want to admit that I couldn't get lean on my own. I tried. I got broken up with in November of 2024. And I tried to get lean for 3 months. November, December, January, and then like the first week of February. And that's when I pulled the trigger of a fitness coach. And it's because I tried for 3 months. I tried to get leaner, right? I thought I got broken up with, and I was just like every other dude, like, oh, I just got broken up with. I'm heartbroken. Like, let me get super jacked and super ripped. Super common. And that's kind of the mentality that I had. And I tried for 3 months. Nothing. I didn't lose a single pound. I thought I was like, oh, I'm eating in a deficit. I didn't lose a single pound. I tried it for 3 months and I completely failed. And it wasn't until I put my ego down and I said, you know what? I need help. I have no idea what I'm doing. And even if I did know what I was doing, I couldn't do it for more than a couple of days or like a week without being like, oh, you know what? This sucks. I'm not seeing more than a half a pound lost. I'm going to quit. And truthfully, once you're able to get to that point where you're actually able to put your pride to the side and accept that you don't have it figured out, because truthfully at the end of the day, right, the one thing that I realize where I'm at right now is if I was good enough to be lean a year and a half ago, I would have already been lean, but I wasn't. I didn't have the habits built down. I didn't have the identity built. If I was already the man capable of being 10% body fat a year and a half ago when I was just under 220 pounds, I would have already been there. And that's just something that you got to ask yourself, because it's just something that I wish I asked myself sooner. Because I tried to convince myself that I had everything figured out, and I tried to convince myself that I could do it on my own. But I got to the point where it's like I tried for 3 months and I saw no results. And I see guys on social media losing like 5 pounds in a week, 10 pounds in a couple weeks, in a month. And I'm like, how? Right? How are these guys doing it? I can't even lose that in 3 months, right? What are these guys doing that's so different? They're not different. They're not different at all. Rather than focusing on the body, they focused on the identity. This has nothing to do with the body itself, right? The physique is the byproduct of the role that you step into, right? The role that you step into of the guy at 10% body fat, he eats whole foods. He eats clean consistently. He does his cardio. He does his workouts. He's already aligned with the 10% body fat version of him before he ever gets lean. And before you know it, you keep doing those same habits every day that the 10% version of you is aligned with, and you become 10% body fat, right? It doesn't start with, okay, I get the six pack and I get the abs first, and then I step into this role. No, you have to take on the role of being 10% body fat before the abs show. And I realized that with my business, right? For so long, there was so many things internally and, within my business that I was putting off for so long. I didn't want to do. I was too lazy to do it. And I suffered the consequences of that. It took me 8 months to grow this business to 5 figures a month. And I realized now I could have done that way sooner, but I wasn't willing to get out of my own way and actually understand, like, okay, I am my bottleneck, right? It's not about information. I knew what to do. I knew exactly what to do. Same thing with my fitness. I knew that I needed to eat clean, eat in a deficit, do my cardio, and do my workouts consistently. I knew I needed to do it, but I couldn't get myself to do it longer than a week or two without being bored, not seeing the result that I wanted. And that's what killed me, right? I thought that I could do this on my own. And truthfully, at the end of the day, right, if you were already good enough to be lean, you would be lean. But the truth of the matter is, if you're not lean right now, it's because you have not currently taken on that role of the person who's 10% body fat. And therefore, you are not 10% body fat. Because if you were already good enough to be 10% body fat, you would be that individual. If you are already fully aligned with that version of you at 10% body fat, that reality would already exist. And the fact that that reality doesn't exist is because you still operate under the identity of someone who's 20, 30, 40% body fat, not the person under 10%. And until you switch that identity inside of your head and you fully align yourself with the man capable of being 10% body fat, you will stay overweight. I don't care what meal plan you have. I don't care what kind of cardio you do, what kind of workouts you do, what kind of food you eat. It does not matter. If your identity is not aligned with the version of you at 10% body fat, you will never get to 10% body fat, let alone keep it, right? It's one thing to get to 10% body fat just by eating a little bit less food and doing some cardio, but the way that you actually keep that is the identity and the person that you become throughout the process, right? You take Retta or you take all these different, peptides and you get to 10% body fat, cool. You're gonna be there for a week or two. You're literally gonna be there for a week or two and you're gonna get to the point where it's like, okay, eventually you're gonna have to get off, right? And what happens when you get off? You go back to eating all this food. You go back to, your old habits and you go back to your old ways and all of a sudden you gain all the weight back. It wasn't peptides. It's not steroids. Those aren't your answer, right? It's true consistency and it's true discipline. And that's what actually breeds success in this game. You will not get the results that you want until you step into the identity of the person who's 10% body fat, period.